You're tuned in to Shake, Rattle, and Goal, the official podcast of your Springfield Thunderbirds.
Osmanski, a one-timer deflected side of the goal. Alexandrov scores!
Hosted by Matt Baker and Steve Forney. A show that's everything Springfield hockey, with interviews including players, coaches, and staff.
The Springfield Indians repeat as the Calder Cup champions.
Listen to this podcast on all major streaming platforms and wherever you download podcasts.
In his first year at the helm, Kevin McDonald and Drew Bannister have the teamers in the Calder Cup Finals.
Watch the podcast on the official Shake, Rattle, and Goal YouTube page at SRG Podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Matt Baker and Steve Forney. Welcome to episode number 3 of the Shake, Rattle, and Goal podcast. Alongside Matt Baker, I am Steve Forney. It's a pleasure to have you all listening with us today. We got a lot to get to, and Matt, for the first time in our podcast short history, we actually have live hockey games to talk about.
Yes, it's good when the content is made for you.
Yeah. So we will get into some of the prospect games that the Blues had. We had tons of Thunderbirds playing in that one. We also have a very special guest today, Kevin Johnson, the in-game host for your Springfield Thunderbirds. You might know his voice from Mix 93.1. You definitely know his face if you go to the games. He's up on the Jumbotron throwing out t-shirts, skating around. Awesome insight from Kevin Johnson. So we'll have that interview for you as well. And we do have obviously a ton of stuff to get to. I did, Matt, just off the top, I wanted to bring up something that I think means a lot to us that work behind the scenes, especially down at ice level. The passing of Jay Denver. Jay Denver was the head of officials, really, at every Springfield game. More often than not, he was the guy standing next to me down in the booth. And when you're stuck in that kind of a small space over the course of 5 seasons with somebody, you really get to know him. Jay was an absolute pro. He took what he did very, very seriously. And I think it took a little while for us to warm up a little bit. There were times where when I first started, I'd be super excited in the booth, and Jay would have to say, hey, look, you're here to work. You're not a fan. If you want to be a fan, go up into the booth, go upstairs if you want to be a fan. And over the course of time, our relationship just grew, and he's an awesome dude, and his kids are great. And, even Jay, when the cancer was really starting to get to him at the end of last season, he didn't miss games. But he spent a lot of time, instead of being in the penalty box next to me, he would sit behind the penalty box in a chair, and he would do the whole game from down there because he was, he's a rink rat for lack of a better term. He loved his job. He loved what he had to do, his responsibility, being in charge of the off-ice officials. And Jay used to always tell me that if I get out of line, he's gonna sharpen his elbows so he could elbow me in the booth. So Jay, we're gonna miss you, buddy. It's not gonna be the same this year at all. Keep those elbows sharp. We're gonna have somebody else sharpen those elbows because I'm probably gonna need them in the ribs. But there's definitely gonna be a big void down there at ice level this coming season, and I don't think anyone's gonna be able to fill it. So to Jay's family, to Kate, to the grandkids. Serious condolences from all of us. And I can't tell you what an important part of my career and my growth Jay was, and just a fantastic guy. And like I said, we're just really going to miss him. So I just wanted to sort of get that out at the top, and then we'll get to the good. Now we'll get to the happy, fun stuff, because we do have a lot of fun stuff to get to as well. In fact, Matt, today, as of today, when we're recording, the Blues announced their upcoming schedule for training camp.
Right. So it looks like, really next week, September 21st, they're starting their training camp. Now, let me ask you this, and this is a question I don't know the answer to. I'm looking at sort of their report, and it 9:30 a.m. Group A, and then Group B. Is that just like how basically are you picturing them splitting their training camp roster into multiple groups? And so this is sort of, hey, Group A, you're going to be at this rink, Group B, you're at this rink, and then they kind of go from there?
Yeah, between between the AHL, between the NHL team, the AHL team, and then all the camp invites, there's a lot of
Sure.
guys.
Yes. Yeah.
So, they put some of the veteran, they grab a handful of veterans, a handful of AHLers, a handful of, rookies, and
Okay.
they divide them up. And then a lot of times when they'll have scrimmages, those two groups will practice with each other. And
Hmm.
then, when they do scrimmaging, it'll be group A against group B. And so it kind of helps them mesh with each other, which I think is more beneficial to the scrimmages. But yeah, I think pretty much every team sort of kind of does that. And then when it comes to scrimmaging, then they'll have a full team. Group A is going to play the Phoenix Coyotes Group A, and Group B is
Right.
going to
Yeah.
play their
Yeah.
Group B. You know what I mean? So
So I guess it would be like a split squad in MLB in
exactly,
training.
it's
Right. That
exactly
makes
what
sense.
it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exciting. I mean, look, September 21st, they've got stuff going on all the way through September 24th. And then I would imagine after that, we will have probably a better uh, outlook as to what our T-Birds roster is going to look like and who's going to be trickling down, and have an idea also of who's going to be up and down, those kind of bubble guys. But it's exciting. I mean, hockey, I saw the pictures of the ice getting made and painted up in the Mass Mutual Center in the Thunderdome over there. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, I even go at the Big E. I went to the Big E, and there's the table, and
Yep.
a couple of reps that I enjoy talking to. I didn't get a chance to because they were like talking to other people, going, "All right, you want to be in the lower bowl or the upper? Where do you want to
Yeah.
be?" And I'm like, "I'm not gonna bother you guys. You sell away, my man. You know." So that is exciting. Like you said, the magic is in the air, and we're starting to get some roster information too. I did notice on the roster is a guy named Isaac Ratcliffe, who I remember
Hmm.
seeing, 6'6", 200-pound winger, played for Lehigh Valley in Chicago. He's one of those guys that I think will probably end up on a roster if he sticks around. So I know we did sort of all the roster stuff in last episode, but that's one guy kind of slipped through the cracks. The other thing I find kind of interesting, Torrey Krug
Hmm.
went down with a lower body injury already. They're not going to reevaluate him till October 1st. That's a long time. I mean,
Mm.
it's the mid-September, so I got to figure that's going to be a spot for Scott Perunovich. I mean, you talk about filling the Torrey Krug mold, littler
Yeah.
guy, can skate, can score, can pass. Um, I assume he'll be the guy to fill in, but I didn't know, Matt, if you thought there was maybe anybody else either on the Blues or Thunderbirds roster that might swing in there.
I mean, I've always kind of felt that Prunovich was that bubble defensive guy, going up and down, similar to like a Tyler Tucker role last year. I think the little bit that we follow the Blues as part of the Thunderbirds, we know that the Blues were ravaged with injuries last year. So I'm just hoping, last year was the injury year, and this year get Torrey Krug healthy. But yeah, I mean, I looking at who is participating on their roster, I'm going through it, and you know, Perunovich is the guy that comes to mind as that villain. I mean, I don't see uh Kessel's not going to stay up. Osmanski's not staying up. Tyler Tucker's there. Leo Loof is still young. Your guy Jeremy Biakabatuka, he's
Yeah,
staying. He's staying
he's
down.
not ready.
So they're not ready yet,
Yeah.
so yeah, it kind of has to be Perunovich, which I like Scotty P. I think he's a great player. I love watching him play. I love saying his name. Um, so
But he's one of those guys that just, I remember the first game he played, just had this like this, I don't want to say cockiness, just this confidence
mhm.
um on the ice. Like sometimes he'll, like, a lot of guys, defensemen will get the puck, and when they're doing line change and stuff, they'll carry it behind the net and they'll stop and they'll wait for everything to organize. He goes like 6 feet in front of the goal and
Yeah,
just stands
yeah,
there with the puck, and he's like, "Go ahead, come and get it." You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Mhm.
Just that
I
that
dare you. I dare you.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I love that. He's a confident skater, confident player, and by the way, a really nice kid. So I want nothing for the best for him, but if I'm Torrey Krug, I'm a little worried. I mean, there's a chance that he steps in and crushes it, and now if you're the Blues, you're looking at a very expensive player that lost their spot, and what do you do with
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I mean, and he's older too. He's not on his last season, on his last leg, no pun intended, but um he's an older player. So you always look at that, and you've got young, energetic guys who need to prove something, and that's the thing about any sport. And if you open that door for somebody else, if they step in and they take it, that could be tough for Torrey Krug.
It's interesting too from Blues perspective because you always want to like if you have a younger, cheaper option, you want to go with it. But if Torrey Krug's ready to play and you're thinking, all right, well, it's time to trade him, no one's going to take him if he's not playing.
It's true. So you're going to have to play him to tease his trading,
value.
put him on the trade block. But yeah, his trade value. I couldn't find the word. Thank you. But it's interesting. I will give the Blues credit. They clearly sold everything off last year, but they're a quick rebuild. Like I don't feel like their roster's in a position where you're looking at a 3-year rebuild. I mean, I really think in the Western Conference they can be, on that playoff bubble this year. So that's another thing too. Is are you looking to pull up these young guys who aren't quite ready, and are you getting them ready by playing? Are you just throwing them into the fire, or are you going to let them mature and let them build on their game here in Springfield? That's a decision for the Blues front office, and that's kind of we touched upon this in an earlier episode where that's it. That's the life of an AHLer.
Yeah.
You get a phone call, you're happy to go up, and then you get sent back down, and you're back taking the bus trips.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting too. The Western Conference to me, like teams 1 through say 5 or 6 are really good, but in the Eastern Conference, teams 1 through like 12 are really good. So I feel like the East is deeper, and I feel like there is opportunity for the Blues, like you said, to kind of sneak into a 6, 7, 8 seed. Especially the way they built the roster in the offseason. They're not here to
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that, even flirting around that 9-10 spot, like I said, that bubble team. I don't think this is a long rebuild for the Blues. And I think that bodes well for Springfield to continue to put out excellent talent at the AHL level.
Yeah, so we do have that to look forward to. We are going to talk about the Prospects tournament. Again, they played 2 games in Minnesota, one against the Wild, one against the Chicago Blackhawks. We are going to get to that in a little bit, but first, we wanted to share our interview in our chat with Kevin Johnson. Boy, what a storyteller. That guy is absolutely fantastic to listen to. So fans of the SRG podcast, get comfortable and hear from our boy Kevin Johnson from Mix 93.1 and your in-game host of the Thunderbirds. All right, it's a pleasure right now on the Shake, Rattle, and Goal podcast to be joined by a face that many of you have seen throughout the Mass Mutual Center if you've been coming to Thunderbirds games. Kevin Johnson, who is the operations manager at iHeartRadio in Springfield. He's also a DJ on Mix 93.1. I believe they call him Dreamy Kevin Johnson on the air. But he's also your in-game host for the Springfield Thunderbirds. Kev, thanks so much for taking the time, my man.
First, you're welcome. First, who is they? I don't know who they is.
All the female listeners that we have usually is what it just usually is.
We threw out a poll, Kevin. We threw out a poll before this, and that's what we got back.
All right, listen, the numbers don't lie. That's
it.
Fact. That's fact.
I just wanted to start off real quick to say thank you to Kev because Kev was my instructor at Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Kev took me on at iHeartRadio. We worked together for about a decade in the radio industry, and Kev set up my first NHL PA gig, which was actually in Brooklyn for the New York Islanders. So I owe a lot of my career to you, pal, and we haven't worked together for a little while here now, but it's nice to reconnect a little bit.
Well, listen, you're welcome. First off, I want to thank you for not being a PIA in class. You were one of the ones I knew had some potential because you didn't make me, crazy. But no, in all seriousness, you're welcome. And thank you, because for me, we've been doing this hockey thing now for a long time. And of course you doing PA, me doing game hosting, and we'll probably get into it a little bit here in a minute. But I started off as my first job in this industry, in the hockey industry, was a fill-in PA guy for a preseason game in Stratford, Connecticut, It was a Sound Tigers Wolfpack preseason game at the rinks in Shelton, because they needed somebody. And my then sister-in-law worked for the Sound Tigers and said, "Hey, you know hockey, you can talk. Why don't you do this?" So I botched my way through that game. And for some particular reason, the team president liked what I did. Oh, bring him in, be our fill-in guy. And then, can he host? Well, let's try it. And I filled in there too. And eventually it became what I'm still doing here today. But the nice part about working in Bridgeport was your proximity to the island. And they not so much the players, but the game staff as well. They would move back and forth. So I got an opportunity to finally do PA in the NHL for the Islanders. And that was the last full season at the old Nassau Coliseum. And, that was it was a Thanksgiving weekend, Saturday night game. It was Isles Devils. Place was sold out. There was legends all season because they were doing, bringing back all the old timers. And I just happened. And the funny thing is I got the script for the game that day emailed to me. I'm reading it on the ferry, and I get to the page in the pregame about Legends Night, and it's a full page. And I look at it, and I just happened to draw Dennis Potvin night. So if there was ever a franchise guy, that's the guy. Here's me making my debut in the NHL, and I have to read a whole page about Dennis Potvin. So, freaking out just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I got through it. It went really well. And then, all right, game starts. We'll settle down. And minute into the game, first penalty. And Steve, you know this, and you can explain this maybe. And I'm not sure if you've gotten into this previously on the podcast, but, the referees don't tell us who the players are. They come over, they yell, they look at you, they throw up a couple of numbers, and they make a sign, and we're supposed to know what the sign means, what the penalty is, or whatever, and what the number is the player. So ref comes over, 68, New Jersey, 2 minutes interference. Okay, so I'm still buzzing from the pregame and just the fact that I'm in a sold out Nassau Coliseum. Place is going crazy, and I look down at my roster, and I look over, and Jaromir Jagr is sitting next to me.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, this is happening. What is going on? This is crazy. And here's a guy who's we won't even get into him, but just an animal, and could still lace him up and play in the NHL today if he wanted to, and be effective and productive and help a team. So that was like probably the most surreal moment. But the whole point of this little story is I had that opportunity, and it was so cool to be able to do it. And I had one more chance. I did a preseason game in Brooklyn the next season. And then they called me again, and I couldn't do it because of my obligations to iHeartMedia and the radio stations. We had a lot going on that day. And the first name in my head was Steve Forney. And I said, I made the phone call, and I said, I know you can do this. Are you available? And I forget exactly what you said. If there was some kind of 4-letter words maybe involved.
No. Here's how this went. Because you had the office sort of across from me. Yeah. We were both at work, and I couldn't see you, but your office was across from me. And the phone rings, and then I'll just hear you go, "Hey, Forney, do you want to PA announce the Islanders game tonight?" And I said, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, you got to go to Brooklyn. You want to do the Islanders game?" I said, "Can I have the rest of the day off?" And you're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "All right, see you later." And I got my car and drove to Brooklyn. It was awesome.
When I started to do PA in Bridgeport, I filled in for Adam Goodman, who was the from day one of the Sound Tigers. I know this is a Thunderbirds podcast. This is probably all taboo what we're talking about, but it's just the business.
Yep.
Adam Goodman was day one PA guy for the Sound Tigers, and I came in at a time when his kids were getting old enough to be into hockey on their own, and he never needed days off. But all of a sudden he found himself needing them. And he always said to me, he's like, "Hey, I appreciate what you do because you come in and you're good at it and I know they're not going to give me a hard time taking days off because the person who's filling in for me isn't going to screw it up.
Right.
So that was the thought in my head. I want to go back eventually and do another PA shot with the Islanders. I want to help them fix their problem of having no PA on game day. And they're calling me, and I'm 2.5 hours away, so I know they're in a tough spot. I want to give them somebody who can get this done and own it. And you were the first name in my head, and you did, and that turned into a lot more than doing one game. So that got you a pretty sweet gig in the NHL.
Sure did. Well, I appreciate it. And I guess with all that, well, what brought you sort of to Springfield? What living in Connecticut, being a Connecticut guy, I guess I'm the only mass guy on the podcast at this point. What brought you up here to Springfield?
You talking hockey or talking in general?
Well, just in general. And I mean, I'm sure the radio station being up here was a thing, but having that gig with the Thunderbirds and something that you've been doing for a long time now, what?
So long story short, and I will keep this as brief as I possibly can, because again, we're on a 40-minute time limit here with Zoom.
Thank you, Zoom.
Thank you, Zoom. I worked for almost 5 years overnights at 96.5 TIC in Hartford, where I became very familiar and worked closely with Damon Scott, a name that people that are hockey geeks in the AHL Northeast region will know, because he's been the game host for the Wolfpack since their day one back in 97. A lot of what I bring to the games in Springfield, I've kind of borrowed from him. He doesn't know it, but I learned from him just watching him do games. I also learned from a guy named Dave Schneider. You ever heard of the band the Zambonis? Dave was the lead singer, and Dave was the game host in Bridgeport when I started to fill in there. So I learned things from Dave, I learned things from Damon, and I kind of brought them all together and then threw my own little spin on it. And that's what you get, on game night in Springfield now. But 5 years at TIC overnights, and I was, what? It's time to not work in the middle of the night anymore, and have people wonder why is this guy, never working when everyone else is awake? What's wrong with him? So I saw a job opening to do afternoons on Mix in Springfield, and I applied for it. And one of the things I taught you guys at the school, Steve, was about, seeing an opportunity you want and go for it and don't wait. So I recorded part of my show that night at TIC on the overnight, did a little bit of editing, brushed up the resume, printed. This is back when you printed resumes out. And then, Springfield's only a half hour up the road. So I went home, I got home at 6:00 in the morning, 6:30, got a few hours sleep, put all the stuff in an envelope, and I drove it to Springfield, and I dropped it off in person. And I got a phone call the next day. Pat McKay was the program director at the time, and he called me and said, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you." And within a week I had the job, and that was it. And it was afternoons, 2 to at the time, 3 to 7, but afternoons in Springfield on Mix 93.1, which I'm still doing. And it's funny, I just coming up in June. We just passed June. I just hit 18 years. So it'll be 20 years in 2025, which if I get there, and it is business, you never know, but if I get there, it'll be 20 years doing the same slot, same station. And that's kind of unheard of in the business.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that maybe that says something about me, but I don't know. But that's how I got to Springfield. And then I was working for Bridgeport. And at the time it was still the Falcons in Springfield. And I want to say it was Bob Oliver who was at a game on the road in Bridgeport, knew me obviously from the radio station, recognized me doing, I think it was a PA game I was doing. Maybe it was hosting. I don't remember. But they called me in the off season, and it was actually Mike Mitchell was the game operations director at the time. Mitch, they called him. And Mitch called and says, "Hey, how come you don't work for us?" And I said, "Well, you never asked me." And that was it.
Fair enough.
So we worked out a quick little conversation, and I said, "Is it cool if I call Bridgeport and just ask them? I could very easily just go ahead and do this, but I'm always about doing things by the book and wanting to play nice and respect the people that gave you an opportunity to give them the courtesy."
Absolutely.
And I got the answer that I knew I was going to get, which was, of course, it's across the street from your radio station. It's a great cross branding. Why wouldn't you do it? So please. And I said, would I still be able to do PA for you guys, off camera stuff? And they said, absolutely. So there was a good, I don't know, 4 or 5 year run when I was game hosting for the Falcons and still working PA for Bridgeport 15, 20 games a year.
Wow.
Which was kind
You
of
you like to work. Yeah. Good for you.
It keeps you busy.
Yeah.
It keeps you out of trouble. But yeah, that's how I got to Springfield, was just, looking to advance, looking to get to that next step. And then I hit a spot and I hit a place where all the stars kind of aligned, and the radio gig's been very good to me. And that started off from just on air opportunities. And to this point now, I'm working with 3 different markets within iHeartMedia, and I'm running 2 of them on the programming side, helping out with the third one. And the hockey thing has just kind of, fallen into place. And it was cool working for the hometown team, and, getting off the air at 7:00, running across the street and going to work in the arena for another couple, 2-3 hours.
Yeah. I loved the being able to, especially Friday nights, I would work on the AM side. I'd be in at 5 a.m. I would leave the radio station at like 11 a.m., go home and sleep, be with the kids, be with my wife, go back to the radio station about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, put in two or so hours of work, and then walk across the street. It was like the best thing ever.
So you talk about a guy who likes to work, right? I may have had that title for a little bit, but I look at what you were doing, Steve, when you were working for the Bruins, and it was two full seasons.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic was right smack in the middle of it. But I mean, you know how it is. Like and both you do. Like once you have kids, everything changes. And
changes.
For one, the Bruins didn't pay me enough to make that trip anymore. But especially, and Matt knows, because we're both teachers. Like, it's one thing to come home at 12:45 on a Tuesday, get 3 hours of sleep, go into a radio station, put your hood up, drink a gallon of coffee, and work at a radio station. It's totally different when you're dealing with freshmen in high school.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And don't talk to me, don't bother me, shut up, sit down. Like, you know what I mean? And it was just I said, I can't raise my kids on the Mass Pike. So like,
well, that's the thing,
and the freshman, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. You were driving. Well, I mean, so here's a little, insight to everyone who's curious. If you're in the game hosting job, especially if you've been doing it as long as I have, once you get past the first 2 games and you've figured out what the new scripts are for the season, it's very similar every game. And you see the same. And that's the beautiful part about minor league hockey, is that it's affordable and it's family and it's the same people at every game, in and out. And you get to know these people, for good and bad, but it becomes family. It's a family, and you really get into a rhythm and a groove. And it makes it very turnkey for me. But the public address announcer job, there's a lot more to that. You need to get your name pronunciations. There's always new players coming in. There's some studying that goes into it that happens pregame. So you got to be there a little bit earlier. Then when you're in game, there are very quiet moments where you're just hanging out watching the flow, but there's also times, and I've seen you scramble, and I tell you what, you handle it better than I've ever done, when there's, 15 minutes of penalties on one call, and then a goal happens 30 seconds later.
Right. Oh,
and it's like everything happens at once, and you're like, how do I focus my thoughts onto getting all of this onto paper, out of my mouth, to the arena? And it's tough. It's very tough. So to do that, make it NHL level, and also make it 2 hours from your house just to get there. Well, hour and a half, right, on the Pike. Then you got to get into Boston, traffic.
Right, 2 hours when you're dealing with traffic and stuff, at least.
Then you got to get home afterwards, and then I guess you get up the next day and deal with high school kids. No, how you did it is beyond me. So no, if someone around here likes to work, it's this guy, not me.
Well, I appreciate that. But yeah, I all last season I'd drive to Springfield and I'd be like, hey, we're here already. I would still text my wife, made it to the game, because when I'm going to Boston, I'd like text her, let her know I made it. That would be like
Man,
10
I
minutes
made
later.
it across the Memorial Bridge.
Made it to
Patrick.
bridge.
Right, right. Yeah. So,
Well,
go ahead.
Kevin, you mentioned, hosting a game, you see the same people, you get to know them. What are some of those interactions like? Because you are still working. Like, do you have people who obviously we all recognize you, they want to chat? Like, what is that interaction like dealing with the fans?
I love it. I love it. And if it wasn't any musician, anybody that does anything for any kind of public audience, athlete, musician, radio person, podcaster, whoever, if it wasn't for the people that cared about what your product is and what you're doing, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have a job. So, at times it can be frustrating if it is busy. My version of busy game hosting different than Steve's version. When you're getting loaded with penalties and a goal, and then there happens to be a promo read that comes up onto the PA announcer. That's when it all kind of comes together. For me, and this is where the Thunderbird staff is actually very, very good, is that they've realized that, you want to maximize the amount of money you can make by selling sponsorships. All of the contests and games we do are all for clients of the team, right? Who pay money to have their name out there and give us these prizes to give to people and to be, recognized by an audience. So, a team that oversells and needs me to be in 5 places, within 5 minutes around the arena, can be very difficult. And that's when it gets tricky, is that sometimes, and I'm also working on the number of whistles you get in a game. And it always seems like the busier the game is promotionally, the less whistles we get in the game.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So now we got to get all this stuff in before the period's over, and we've gotten 2 whistles the entire period. It's like, well, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And then the games where you've got nothing going on, it's like icing after icing after icing, and it's like, oh god.
Right.
But where it gets frustrating is that, you need to be, here and then here and here. You're on a time crunch, and you run into that one person that loves to talk to you and just doesn't quite get it that you're working. And that's fine, because they're there having a good time. And what I'm doing, Steve, what you're doing, what the team's doing, is all part of that good time. So what I always try to remember is that even though I need to be someplace, I've got to focus. I can't let that get to me. And you got to be as polite as you can. Hey, I got a buzz. I'll be back. I'll come back and see you. And I do make an effort to try to get back and see that person at some point. And if I don't, they're fine with it. And I'll see them the next game anyway, because they're there the next next night. But that's the cool part about it, is that the fans are really understanding when you are busy. And you just, you give them that respect that they give you. They're there and they give you compliments, and you respect them for wanting to hear what you're saying and enjoy what you're doing. And, I am parsley is what I'll say. If the Thunderbirds are the steakhouse, right? You're coming in for the nice cut of, New York strip, right? That's the team. That's the hockey. I'm the parsley over here on the side. I'm just there to make sure that everything is a little extra, right? That's what my job is. And I try to do it the best I can.
Now there's a line in Ocean's 11 where he says they need to meet you, like you, and then forget you exist the minute that you leave the room. And that's how that's how I feel about my job. You need to know me, like me, and then forget I'm even there. And so are you actually, like, do you actually get to enjoy the game? Like, is there any, between the fans and everything else, do you actually get to sit down and watch the game at all? Or
if anyone, so here's a little secret. If anybody pays attention to where I am, third period, things get quiet for me. And again, this is where the Thunderbird staff really understands the game. Let's get all of our promo things, all of our sponsorship items done as early as we can. Luke, the game operations director now, is really good at that. He and I have got a great back and forth. I've been with Luke now for a long time. And we get all these things done early So by the third period, if you do have a game that doesn't have a lot of whistles and timeouts, we can push things later in the game. But if the game goes the way it's supposed to, I don't have a lot going on in the third. So what I'll do is just find myself sitting down there for the last 10, 15 minutes of the game, behind the goal judge at the referee's entrance, sitting behind the T-Birds goalie.
Mhm.
And I just watch the game. I just watch. And that's when I really get to take it in. I try to pay attention throughout the entire game, even while I know I've got to be here for this giveaway. I got a t-shirt toss coming up, whatever. But I'm always watching the game with one eye and one ear, because there is, if the team wins, a post-game interview. And
Mhm.
I don't want to come in with some basic, blah, run-of-the-mill questions. I want to ask them a question that's pertinent to what happened in the game. And whether it's a play that involved that player directly, if it was the goal, or if it kind of was the overall tone of the game. I want it to be an intelligent question that the player will appreciate, and it will give the fans some actual insight as to what happened. So I'm watching the whole game, but then the third period, when it's quiet, then I can really sit there and watch. And now I'm formulating the questions. And if we're up by a couple of goals and looking like we're going to have a win, although it feels like more often we're always tied with like 4 minutes
Really
to go.
does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know if I'm going to go out there or not, but I'm thinking of those questions. What am I going to ask? And again, you ask the first star of the game. So some games, you never know who that's going to be until the last 2 minutes. Other games, it's very obvious. Someone's got a hat trick in the first 3 minutes and the team's up by, 6, you know who it's going to be. But other games, you don't. If the goaltender's standing on his head and pitching a shutout, a 40 save shutout, it's going to be the goaltender.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm watching the game. I'm enjoying the game, but I'm also thinking about the on ice interview. And, I never thought of it this way, but I forget who this was within the organization a couple of years back, about, it may have been with the Falcons, about doing the interview. And because the Falcons never did the interview before I started in 2012. And I brought that in with me from Bridgeport, because they did it in Bridgeport all the time. And I said, are they going to want to do this? And somebody said, these guys want to make the NHL. And if you make the NHL, one of the things you're going to have to do is interviews.
Yep.
So even though it's like a race car driver, you can be the best driver in the world, but if you can't bring in your own sponsors and bring in your own money and bring in your brand,
Yeah, branding.
you're not going to get to drive. The players in the NHL, same thing. Any major league sport, right? That is part of the game. It's your brand, your play, your skill, your ability, but also your fan interaction and your media interaction is a big part of it.
Yeah. We're talking with Kevin Johnson, the in-game host for your Springfield Thunderbirds. Probably got time for about one more question. Matt, you got anything you wanted to fire away?
Well, I mean, do you have any quick stories? I'm thinking, I mean, I know I've actually, my family, we sit in section 31. So we've seen you hanging out there.
Oh boy. So you watch me down there hiding out down behind the.
I didn't want to call you out. I like to peek around, and we found out Santini's hiding spot, pregame last year. He was up there. But do you have any interactions other than that post-game interview with any players or even referees? Because I mean, they come back and forth, right, kind of where you are. Do you have any quick stories about referees or any player interactions?
The players not so much, because they're in a separate area from us, and I never want Steve. You have the opportunity to sit there and kind of just have the brief, casual conversation. You see them every game. They're sitting next to you when they got a penalty. You can get into a conversation. With me, it would be I would have to search them out, and I don't want to make it seem like, hey guys, I'm grilling you, I'm interviewing you, I'm pre-interviewing you for the next game. It would be kind of funky. But if I do pass somebody, in the hallway, they're always very, very nice. I'll say this, Tommy Cross, who just retired, nicest person in the world. And another guy who's another favorite of Springfield hockey, Colin McDonald, who played for the Islanders for a while, finished his career in Adirondack. No.
Lehigh Valley.
Lehigh Valley. Thank you. I was thinking of the Adirondack Phantom. Lehigh Valley for Philadelphia. And I talked with Colin at the All-Star game. When the All-Star game was over, we all got to go on the ice. And I know Colin from, long story short, I played softball with him for 2 games. Summertime beer league. Friend of a friend's father who was a cop in the town I grew up in. They all played together in College of Providence. So we got Colin to come in and kind of be a pinch hitter for us on the beer league softball team. The kid got up first at bat, first pitch, jacked a homer. We're on the bench because he was DH and we're just talking. He was leaving for Oilers training camp the next day.
Wow.
Like, it was just cool. That's the coolest. And again, the nicest guy in the world. Referees, they're always cool. Brent Colby is linesman in the NHL. Brent actually works with my wife. His day job is in the same building my wife works in Hartford. So he and I always have a quick, hey, how's the wife doing? Yeah, good. How's the kids? Yeah, great. You know, and we'll just kind of go back and forth. And he's, I would say at this point, the hockey game is a young man's game. The reffing game is a young man's game. Brent's been at it for a long time and he holds his own, no problem with those kids. So it's cool to talk to him too.
Well, Kev, this has been awesome, man. We really appreciate you taking the time. This is great. Season's right around the corner. And like I said, I miss just shooting shooting the breeze on a regular basis when we work together. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some stories. This was a lot of fun.
This is definitely fun. And I can't wait to get started here. I know the season's a couple of weeks away and just stoked about it. So looking forward to getting back and seeing you. And Steve, back to you.
There you go.
Live from the porch. That's Kevin Johnson.
Live from the porch. The end of my summer. Here we go.
Yeah. All right, pal. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
We'll see you
Thank
all
you, Kevin.
hockey, everybody. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. That was Kevin Johnson from the Springfield Thunderbirds and Mix 93.1, my former boss. And it was always great having my boss skating around on the ice with me. And I know, like I said in the beginning of the interview, I owe that guy so much for my career. And I'm glad that he's still like a part of my life. Like, I don't work at that radio station anymore. He wasn't the one who fired me, by the way. It was COVID that fired me, but it's nice that we can still connect and, hang out.
And you know what's awesome? I mean, hearing Kevin talk, we interviewed Luke a few weeks ago, hearing you talk about Jay. I said this on our first episode. I'm the fan here. It's just incredible how professional everybody you're talking to behind the scenes, how professional this organization is, how close knit this organization is. And to hear the backstory between you and Kevin and how it kind of came all full circle and you guys are still together here with the Thunderbirds. It's just incredible. And I do think, it goes back to my sense of community that pulled me into the Thunderbirds. You can tell that the Thunderbirds are a family organization, and there's no better place that I would rather spend my money with my family than going to the Thunderdome. It's just incredible. Great chatting with Kevin and hearing everybody just continue to talk about the professionalism and just the feeling around that organization is a great thing.
Yeah. Well, it's a great place to work. And I think that's one of the things we're shooting for. We say it every episode, but when we do these interviews, we want to have players on and stuff like that. And once the season gets going, we will. But to sort of get the back end view of it, to pull behind the curtain and see what's going on back here. And I mean, I live it every day, but to hear that from you is great because I want to make sure we're not boring the hell out of people, but Kevin's the best and I could talk to that guy forever. So thanks to him for joining us. And as we look back last weekend, the prospects tournament, I'm sure you, like I, was sort of locked into that first game. What were some of your takeaways? A couple takeaways from that one, Matt.
Well, I know we both share this first one right off the bat. Big Z is big. He came up big, and it is one game. Let's not expect a 0.89 goals against average for a season, but he's big time. He's continuing to develop. You can tell he's continuing to work on his craft. It almost makes me worried as to, you've got this great goalie prospect. What do you do with them? You've got Binner in the NHL. You got Hofer there now. Do you look to I mean, I hope he doesn't go anywhere else, but Zarenko looked great. You've got him and Zubin as your 1-2. That's a pretty solid AHL goaltending rotation.
Yeah.
I don't, whether you split it 60-40, one or the other, 50-50, 70-30, however you split that rotation, they're going to be pretty solid in goal.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's part of the reason why the Blues brought in Subban in the first place was because, Bennington gets hurt every year.
Yep.
And, if you are calling up Zarenko on a regular basis, it's Colton Ellis to be the back, to be the sort of the third guy in at the AHL level. So I guess having that experience, I think, would go a long way. But you're right. I hope that it doesn't get to the situation to where the Blues aren't performing well, and Zarenko becomes a trade chip. I really hope that's not the case. I don't think they can trade Bennington if they want to. I don't think they want to trade Hofer. So if a team is inquiring about goalies and they're going to blow them away with an offer for Zarenko, the Blues would be silly not to take it. But you're right. I saw confidence, kind of like we were talking about Perunovic. He was always in position, ready to go. And even the Minnesota Wild announcers, it's so hard listening to another team's home. It's just like, guys, shut up already. Well,
yeah.
But even they were sort of flabbergasted by the confidence and the positioning of Zarenko. And you're right. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. The other guy I wanted to bring up, who I think kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, and I know that we talk a lot about Adam Gaudette, but Mikhail Abramov was kind of the big prospect moved in that Ryan O'Reilly trade to Toronto. And I'm wondering if he's got a little something to prove. I mean, this will be his first year with the team. He's a little bit older. I think he's 23, 24. I think he started to come on a little bit at the end of the season, but do you think this is a big prove it year for Mikhail Abramov?
I think it would have to be, like you said. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly, that he was such a big part of that Blues organization. And I think when you are right, pawn is the wrong word to use in that. When you're an asset moved in that deal, you're kind of saying, look, I'm not giving away O'Reilly for nothing here. I'm giving him away to better our franchise for the foreseeable future. And when you're a part of that trade, I think it does come with a little bit of added pressure where obviously you're doing it for yourself, right? Intrinsically, you want to be up there in the NHL. You want to be performing for as many fans as you can. But hey, this organization put a lot put all their chips, not all their chips, put a lot of chips in my basket, and I don't want to disappoint. So I think you are right. I think it does come with some added pressure, and I think you would give any player the benefit of the doubt in mid-season trades. It takes them a while to get acclimated to their new scene, their new teammates, the new style of play on the ice. And now it's all right, bud, let's see what you got. We traded for you. You weren't just a giveaway piece. We traded for you, and now we want you to do something.
Yeah, and I overshot it. He's only 22. So when you're that age and you get moved in a big deal like that, and he is only a 4th round pick, but even still, you can see the talent is there. Mm-hmm. So, it can't be easy. I mean, it's definitely easier than playing in a place like Toronto for sure. Mm-hmm. In terms of market, but I think he's got some countrymen. I'm sure him and Alexandrov are building a relationship together too, which is helpful. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm expecting some good things from Abramov.
Did you find it so also about that game? We had a lot of goals scored by Thunderbirds players. Were you practicing your T-Birds goal in the living room over there when your kids were sleeping?
Well, I'm getting enough vocal warm-ups with the Connecticut Sun in the playoffs. That is okay. Like I come home hoarse. But I am excited to say Jeremy Biakabatuka. That is the one that I'm very excited about. Although he is sort of one of my thumbs down in that game. I thought that he looked a little the game was a little bit quick for him.
Fast for him, yeah.
And being that big, it's going to take him a little bit to get used to it. But you saw some nice things from Zach Bolduc and Zach Dean.
Yeah, they actually paired together. They were good chemistry already. I think it was it Dean with the goal, assisted
Yep.
from Zach Bolduc. So it's good to see the chemistry there already.
Was Alexandrov the other one on that line? I think it was Dean Bolduc and Alexandrov.
Yeah,
This
yep.
is awesome.
He was wearing the C.
Yeah.
Are we reading into that a little bit? Or, I mean, we had a full episode on this. What are we thinking here?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up. I I think that if to me, Alexandrov seems one of those guys that's going to be up and down all year.
I agree.
And
Yeah.
I think that if your guy's going to be up and down all year, it's tough to give him the C because then he's just not going to be there for half the time. So I would say if they don't give him the C, it would be for that reason. But and again, Will Bitten wasn't there. If Will Bitten had played, I'd be curious to see who was wearing what.
Sure.
But I think that for that prospect tournament itself, I think that's so great for Alexandrov because he's in the AHL and the NHL, he's the young guy. And the prospects tournament, he is the old savvy vet.
Sure.
And I wish I had wrote it down, but they said something in the broadcast of like the Blues had like 8 guys that it was their second or third year in the prospect tournament, and the Wild had 2.
Wow.
So it was like, that whether it was Alexandrov or any of those guys that have been doing this for a while, that's a good opportunity for them to learn how to be leaders. And I don't think I thought too much into it at the time, although now that you bring it up, I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit.
That was the thought. I mean, I noticed that silly little stuff, and I'm like, ooh, all right, okay. I love Alexandrov. I think he's a good player. I think he's great. I'm always, when you get the notifications on your phone, the Thunderbirds send out who's getting called up. I pick the boys up from school, and it's always it's sad when I'm like, yeah, boys, Alexandrov's heading back up, and they're like, oh man, But I always would wish them all the best. But seeing with the C, I'm like, all right, okay,
yeah.
we'll
have to keep an eye on it. I'm surprised it hasn't been announced, but I mean, training camp starts Thursday, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. I think if there's any moving pieces, maybe that'll be the start of the process with it. And, I think it's crazy. We're less than a week away. So it's freaking awesome. A couple other takeaways from that game. I thought, talking about guys stepping into leadership roles, Kean Washcrock was awesome, man. That kid was absolutely all over the place. That fight was awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody's seen our new Facebook profile picture? It just rules. He is like locked in, ready to
he's
smack
locked in.
He's
mid-season form. I loved it. That was good. That was good. And it's, you can see, I don't want to downplay it, right? And call it a meaningless game, because it's anything but that. It is not meaningless to these players. And to us as a fan, we're watching it on a live YouTube stream, and you're like, yeah, all right, yeah, I'm doing other stuff, but you see the intensity, and you see the drive, and you see the passion that he played with. That was great to see. I think it's a sign of good things to come for him this year.
Yeah, agreed. And talk about kids stepping into leadership roles. I think it'll be a big year for Kean Washcrock. I think his position is sort of wide open. I think he's the kind of guy that could be playing some pretty big minutes, killing. I think he can kill penalties. I think he can play on the power play. So he might be getting a lot of minutes, and I think that's good for him. And again, seems like a nice role to step into. Somebody else who I thought was strong was this Michael Buchinger. Buckinger. I should learn that one before opening night. But just one of those guys I just always noticed. He was just always everywhere. Both ends of the ice, just was a very strong player. Another one of those guys who really wants to be at the NHL level, and I don't know if he's quite ready. So I anticipate him coming to Springfield with a little bit of a fire under his rear end, ready to go. So
the only other notes I had were on sort of the not as good games. And for me, I'll be a homer here, but at the same time, call a spade. And Matt Kessel, just I feel like he's a guy, and I know he's local, and he's got ties here in Massachusetts. He just seems he's got the talent, but he just seems to be the wrong place in the wrong time. I remember last season, I believe it was their second to last home game against the Hershey Bears, and they're playing them great. Towards the end of the first period, a unforced turnover right there on the blue line leads to the first goal, and then the floodgate came. It's just those kinds of things, and again in a game that where you want to see he's there and you want to see him take that next step. Here he is right in the blue, right in the crease, knocking an own goal in off his skate, and you're just like, Kessel, what are you doing? I just and so he's just, I don't know, he's one of those players that obviously I root for him. I want him all, wish him all the best, but I need to see him eliminate those unforced turnovers, those unforced errors, those wrong place at the wrong time type of plays. I need to see those eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple bad penalties too.
Yeah.
Which he used to get the delay of game ones. You just flip it up the glass and you miss, and it's like, ugh.
But and I mean those things happen when you're out of position and then you're rushing. And I feel like it's not always the play itself, it's the lead up to the play that causes some of those turnovers or penalties. And when you're out of position, then you start to scramble and you lose sense of his God-given talent that he clearly has, so I hope he can kind of right the ship there a little bit, and because we're going to need a strong back line. I think goaltending will be fine, but you're giving away turnovers at the blue line. It doesn't matter who you got in goal,
Yeah, and Tommy Cross gone.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Who's the big guy who went to
Samorukov
Damarukov is gone, right? So and
and
assume
Santini.
Santini's gone. Assume Perunovic isn't going to be there. Josh Jacobs, who they acquired, is on the injured list.
Yep.
So
Yep.
If they're not thin on the back end, they're going to be young and
They're
raw.
young.
And
They're young.
fresh.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be looking at him to be the kind of the leader back there in the back end. And yeah, we can't be taking bad penalties, and you can't be, like you said, out of position, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
And again, speaking of young defenseman, Jeremy Biakabaduka, my man, that's just a bad penalty because he's so big and the other guys are so small and fast, and he's just trying to play catch up. And it's like, I don't know what he's gonna bring. I know nothing about the player, never seen him play other than that game we watched. I want him to be so good because I love his name.
Yeah.
But what? Not the strongest game for him either. And when it comes to the second game, against Chicago, they lose 5-0. Connor Bedard with a hat trick. I mean, that dude is just righteous.
I love these generational talents in any sport. I love being able to tell my kids stories about Derek Jeter, and I love that my kids saw the tail end of Tom Brady, and they're learning about learning about Wayne Gretzky and Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, boys, this Bedard kid, I hate to, knock on wood saying this, but he looks the part. Number one overall pick. It's incredible that Chicago can keep getting these guys. But he looked. Yeah.
He ended up in a big market. I wonder how.
Yeah. But it's he looks the part. And I think it's fair to leave it at that. He looks the part, and good luck for him.
You're so right, though. I mean, even if I get home late, especially like from a Thunderbirds game, and I'll throw on the NHL Network because I love hockey that much, and McDavid is on, I'm not turning it off. Like,
he's so fun.
You're gonna miss something, and even if he doesn't score, like you said, it's just fun to watch. So yeah, I think Connor Bedard is gonna be the next thing, and that little wrist shot he had from outside the slot, like I don't know how you stop that at any level. It was just,
that's a stinger. That's a stinger.
Just
he
ruthless.
Just yeah.
And then the only other thing I wanted to bring up about the weekend was, because I always pay attention to the commentators, being the radio nerd that I am, and I'm watching the game, and the Blues, the Thunderbirds, and the Prospects game, did such a good job of clogging the middle of the ice, and I found that every shot Minnesota was taking was from the outside, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, they're doing a really good job, below the hash marks, and just keeping anything that comes in gets sent straight out. All of the shots from Minnesota are coming from the point. And then the commentator goes, well, the Wild D are really getting involved in the offense. It's good to see them getting involved in the offense. And I'm like, the only reason they're getting involved in the offense is because the Thunderbirds are taking everything down below away. And I think that's a good sign too.
Yeah, well, and so let me ask you this quick question: like, how much of that, as a commentator, someone in radio, I know you don't do play by play, but how much of that perspective is to almost you're spinning it for your crowd, right? If you're not, you wouldn't sit there and congratulate the other team on your network to say, well, they're doing, you're gonna, is that intentional spin?
I don't think so. And if anybody listens to Ryan on the call, I think he does a really good job. He's able to see both sides of the ice. I think that when you are calling a game for, say, St. Louis, you're watching your players more than you're watching the other team, right? It's like if you're watching a football game and you're watching your offensive line, you're like, well, how come my guy didn't get the block?
Yeah, yeah.
Meanwhile, if you're watching the other side, you're like, what a great move that was on the offensive line. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
It's like whatever lens you're looking at from, I don't think that is something that's forced. It's not like a political agenda or anything like that. I think it's more of what lens you're looking at the game from. And especially a play-by-play, you can't watch everything. Your job as the play-by-play guy is to watch the puck. You got to watch the puck, follow the puck, wherever the puck goes, that's what you're looking at. So, I think it's all perspective. If that guy was on the Blues broadcast, he might have said something different, So
sure. Yep.
But I don't think those kind of things are intentional. I think, again, I'm looking at it through one lens saying they're suffocating the offensive zone, and he's looking at the other lens saying, boy, the D's taking a lot of shots. Like, it's just two different viewpoints on the same play.
And ultimately, you're right. I think anytime you have to say, well, our defense is getting involved in the offense, I think that's a good sign for the Thunderbirds and for the Blues, because that means you're taking away their offense. No team goes into it with a game plan saying, all right, D, we need 3 goals out of the back line here. Overall, over the weekend, you come away with a split 1-1, but I think there are a lot of good things, a lot of things to work on. You got training camp coming up in a week, and hopefully we'll get an official T-Birds roster to you as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And this was a lot of fun. It's funny how, Matt, the season hasn't even started yet. 3 episodes in, I'm having a blast. We always got stuff to talk about. A big thank you to Kevin Johnson for joining us. That interview was absolutely fantastic. So really appreciate him taking the time. And again, for those of you listening out there, if you get a chance to give us a like or a subscribe, on Apple, on Spotify, YouTube, however you're consuming us, we really appreciate that. And lastly, any businesses, particularly a local business, we'd love to have you be a part of our organization as a sponsor. And again, we're not doing this to make money hand over fist. We would like, though, to cover our sort of operating costs, which again are not a lot of money, but if we can get those covered a little bit, that would help out too. And trust me, you'll get your money's worth. Captain Radio Guy, trust me, I'll make it worth your time. That's for damn sure. So but Matt, thanks for taking the time today. This was a blast as always.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening, and let's go T-Birds.